The plaza of Eric's Prime was built for spectacle. Marble arches soared into the sulfur-colored sky, banners of the Galactic Empire rippled like the tongues of predators, and the stage glimmered with polished steel, where the condemned would kneel. The crowd, composed of dozens of species, murmured with a restless hunger. They had gathered to witness what the Empire called a necessary correction: 3 human brides to be executed for disobedience. To the aliens present, it was entertainment dressed as justice. The first bride was small, delicate, with hair like autumn leaves that fell across her pale cheeks. She lifted her chin, though her wrists trembled against the shackles. The second wore a simple blue dress, torn at the hem, but her gaze was defiant, a fire behind tear-rimmed eyes. The third, dark-haired and quiet, mouthed a prayer humans alone could recognize. The announcer, a reptilian aristocrat named Adlerin, hissed into the amplifier. Let this be a lesson to all who imagine that their customs outweigh imperial law. These mammals forgot their place. Laughter rippled through the crowd. An insectoid diplomat clicked her mandibles in delight. A bulbous avian creature fluffed its feathers, muttering that humans were dramatic even in death. And yet, in the front row, an ancient alien sage leaned on his staff, eyes clouded with age. He whispered, almost to himself, "They should not have done this." Humans bury grief in silence. That silence is more dangerous than any scream. The blade fell 3 times. The plaza roared approval. The broadcast traveled instantly across networks. Billions of alien citizens watched, some amused, some indifferent. When the signal reached Earth, however, the reaction was eerily quiet. No riots, no fiery speeches. Just a silence that stretched across continents. In a quiet farmhouse in Montana, General Marcus Hale set his teacup down with meticulous care. His living room was plain, shelves of books, a chessboard frozen mid-game, a single photograph of a smiling woman in a wedding dress, now gone. Marcus stared at the cooling tea as though it were a battlefield map. His voice, calm and level, carried no tremor. "You've killed my wife," he said. He sounded as though he were informing someone of the weather. Half a world away, Admiral John Riker slouched on the porch of a coastal house, the sea wind ruffling his thinning hair. He had been known as a joker, the kind of man who disarmed enemies with laughter before striking. As the broadcast ended, he chuckled once, dry as dust. "Well," he muttered, "they really do have a talent for bad wedding receptions." His hand, though, crushed the beer can until it split, foam running down his knuckles. Colonel Ethan Cross watched from a cabin buried in the Alaskan pines. He was younger than the others, but harder around the edges, a man who had buried comrades, parents, and now a wife. His scarred hands rested on his knees, motionless. Only his eyes shifted, dark and fathomless. He did not speak. He simply rose, put on his coat, and walked into the snow, as though the wilderness itself had given him orders. The galaxy, of course, laughed. In the Imperial Senate, alien delegates congratulated themselves. A feline species purred that humans were sentimental livestock. They would grieve but comply. The reptilian Adlerin declared victory. See how the mammals bow. But humans did not bow. They prepared. When Marcus Hale arrived at the diplomatic chambers of the Empire 2 weeks later, he was dressed immaculately, uniform crisp, smile warm. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, even complimented the Senate's architecture. The aliens mistook his courtesy for weakness. "You have our condolences," an insectoid ambassador chittered. "Loss is regrettable, but necessary for order." Marcus smiled thinly. "Yes, necessary. We humans understand sacrifice." He stirred sugar into his tea, slow and deliberate. "In fact, we have built entire civilizations on it." They chuckled, believing it banter. Meanwhile, Admiral Riker traveled aboard a creaky freighter to an alien trading hub. He wandered the market, making jokes about exotic fruits, teaching merchants Earth slang they didn't understand. To the untrained eye, he was a widower numbing pain with humor. Yet every handshake planted coded instructions. Every casual story contained coordinates. The jokes were seeds, and the aliens laughed as they swallowed them whole. Colonel Cross worked in shadows. In mining colonies on the fringe, he gathered rough men and women, farmers with calloused hands, machinists with tired eyes. He taught them formations, discipline, the old soldier's calm. They trained in silence, rifles lined in rows, where once only plows had stood. When asked why, he would answer only, because they killed her. Nothing more. The Empire remained confident. Their analysts declared humans incapable of uniting. Their politics are fractured, their cultures diverse, their military modest. They are gnats with delusions. But some alien voices trembled. A merchant who had traded on Earth muttered to his peers, "They laugh at funerals. They tell jokes in battle. What kind of creature hides grief with humor?" His peers ignored him. The silence of Earth continued. No official declarations, no parades, no public outrage. Just a patient, watchful calm, as though the entire species inhaled and held its breath. In the Senate one evening, Marcus Hale rose during a session. His words were smooth, carefully chosen. "We thank the Empire for reminding us of our fragility. Life is short, yes. Love is shorter still. But you must understand, humans are strange. We tend to remember everything. Insults, injuries. The smallest slight can ferment for generations." Aliens chuckled. One asked, "And what will you do, General? Send more of your primitive ships to buzz our patrols?" Marcus tilted his head, as though the idea amused him. "Ships? Oh no. Ships are replaceable. Wives, less so." He sipped his tea. "We are not rushing. We are preparing." The chamber fell briefly silent, then erupted again in laughter. They thought him melodramatic. On the coast, Riker walked into a dingy alien tavern, ordered a drink, and leaned back while a dozen eyes watched him. He toasted cheerfully, voice booming. "To wives, may they forgive us for being late to dinner." Laughter followed, but those closest noticed his hand sketching shapes in condensation on the glass, battle formations, erased as quickly as drawn. Cross moved through colonies, leaving behind silence and discipline. Where once miners grumbled, now they drilled in unison. Children practiced signals in fields. The snow around his cabin grew thick with footprints of volunteers who came and left harder than they arrived. The Empire misread it all. They saw humor, calm, and patience as defeat. They mistook civility for surrender. One night, Marcus Hale stood alone by the chessboard in his study. The Black Queen lay toppled, captured by White. He whispered, not to anyone, but to the memory framed in silver on the shelf. "They think this is about power, about politics. They don't understand." He lifted the piece, set it gently back. "It's about you." In orbit above Eric's prime, alien fleets conducted exercises, confident in their dominance. Pilots joked that humans would never rise. Generals spoke of moving on to discipline other worlds. But somewhere in the dark between stars, a convoy of human ships slipped away, transponders silent, hulls coated to swallow light. They did not broadcast. They did not boast. They simply vanished into the black. The aliens laughed again. "Lost," they said. "Clumsy mammals." Yet in the silence of that black, messages passed between three men. Marcus Hale's voice was calm. Phase 1 complete. Riker's reply carried the ghost of a chuckle. "Guess it's time to RSVP properly." Cross spoke only once. "We move at dawn." On Earth, cities continued their routines. People worked, dined, watched sunsets. Outwardly, nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, the pulse of a predator waited. The Empire celebrated their triumph still, blind to the quiet storm they had birthed. And across the stars, unseen, humanity began to sharpen its teeth. The Galactic Empire loved nothing more than the sound of its own triumph. 2 months after the execution of the human brides, the capital world of Kael'thar blazed with celebration. Towers shimmered with golden lights, parades spilled into streets wide enough for entire war beasts to march, and alien dignitaries toasted the wisdom of their senate. To the Empire, the matter was closed. Humanity had been humiliated. Order had been reaffirmed. From balconies, reptilian aristocrats waved to the masses. A choir of crystalline beings sang a hymn that reverberated through the air like struck glass. Vendors sold miniature replicas of the execution platform as trinkets for tourists. Laughter echoed, self-satisfied and complacent. Yet beneath the roar of approval, a murmur lingered. Reports of missing patrols trickled in from the frontier. Convoys vanished into black space. Colonies whispered of strange human activity. The Senate dismissed these as rumors, pirates, equipment failures, accidents of navigation. Humans were too fractured, too weak. They mourned with poetry and tears, not with fleets. Marcus Hale arrived on Kael'thar that same week. His uniform was immaculate, his posture impeccable, his face a mask of composure. The senators greeted him with smug curiosity, eager to gauge the reaction of the widower general. He bowed with practiced grace, smiling warmly. "General Hale," hissed Senator Adlerin, his scaled lips curling. "We hope you are adjusting. Such personal loss can be inconvenient." Marcus inclined his head. "Loss shapes us, Senator. It teaches us patience." He sipped the tea provided, as though this were a garden party rather than the epicenter of an empire. And patience, in turn, teaches us strategy. Laughter followed. They thought him eccentric, clinging to human rituals of politeness. His words were written off as poetic rambling. But Marcus's eyes, calm and steady, tracked every guard rotation, every door, every nervous twitch in the chamber. His smile hid calculations. On a distant trade world, Admiral John Riker played his part with more flamboyance. He strolled through bazaars, slapping backs, spinning stories. His booming laugh filled taverns, where alien merchants drank fermented brine. They adored his jokes, though most made no sense to them. "So there we were," Riker said, raising a mug, 3 Marines, 1 shovel, and a bear the size of a shuttle. "You know what we did?" Aliens leaned closer, eyes wide. "We told the bear it was late for dinner." He roared with laughter, slamming the mug down. Foam splashed across the table. The poor beast apologized. They laughed because his laughter demanded it, though the humor was lost in translation. Yet behind the jokes, Riker bartered for star maps, bribed dockworkers for schedules, and passed coded notes in the form of children's riddles. Each punchline carried hidden orders. Every laugh disguised a maneuver. Meanwhile, Colonel Ethan Cross walked among the outliers of civilization, the miners, farmers, smugglers. He spoke little, but his presence carried weight. In frozen colonies, where or dust coated lungs, he gathered men and women hardened by survival. They trained with rifles in silence, boots stamping patterns in dirt fields. Children watched their parents move with mechanical precision and mimicked the motions. Cross offered no speeches, only discipline. When asked why, he simply said, "Because they killed her." That was enough. The Empire, in its arrogance, misread the shifting currents. They saw Marcus's diplomacy as weakness, Riker's jokes as buffoonery, Cross's training as paranoia. Analysts reported that humanity was pacified, grieving itself into irrelevance. The Senate applauded its own brilliance. But cracks appeared. A merchant ship limped into port, hull scorched. Its crew swore they had been ambushed by human vessels, primitive, patched together, but deadly precise. A fleet of 6 alien frigates sent to investigate never returned. Entire mining stations went dark. Senator Adlerin dismissed it all as fabrication. "The mammals seek attention," he hissed. "Let them gnaw at scraps." The Empire remained supreme. Yet in hushed corners of the Senate, some grew uneasy. The old sage who had warned during the execution spoke again. "You mistake silence for surrender," he said. "But silence is how predators breathe before they strike." His words were ignored, drowned in laughter. Back on Kael'thar, Marcus Hale attended a banquet. The hall glittered with chandeliers of plasma, dishes served on plates of crystallized gas. Alien nobles feasted on delicacies, while slaves played music on trembling instruments. Marcus raised his glass in toast. "To the Empire," he said warmly. "May its memory outlast its deeds." The words were ambiguous enough to pass as praise, but the smile that followed was sharper than glass. A few senators shifted uncomfortably, though they did not know why. Riker, in another corner of the galaxy, leaned across a tavern table toward a group of alien mercenaries. "Tell me," he said with a grin, "you ever wonder what humans do when they're cornered?" One of the mercenaries sneered. "They beg." Riker laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Wiping tears from his eyes, he leaned closer, voice low, deadly serious. "No. We start making lists." Then he clapped the mercenary on the back, booming with laughter again. The mercenary forced a chuckle, but later that night, he abandoned his post and fled the sector. Colonel Cross, quiet as the snow he walked through, transformed ragged colonists into soldiers. He taught them not merely to fight, but to wait, to watch, to strike with precision. His eyes burned with a grief too cold to soften. The people followed because his silence spoke louder than speeches. Weeks passed. Alien reports grew frantic. Communications blackouts spread. Trade routes faltered. Patrol fleets vanished like stones in a bottomless well. The Empire's laughter became nervous. At a Senate session, Marcus addressed the chamber once more. "Humans are curious creatures," he said pleasantly. "We mourn with silence. We plan with patience. And when the time comes, we act with efficiency." An avian senator scoffed. "You are but one species among thousands. What can grief teach that the Empire does not already know?" Marcus set his teacup down with deliberate care. "That love is not weakness. It is motive." His gaze swept the chamber, calm but unblinking. And motive, senators, is the one resource you cannot tax, trade, or regulate. The room fell silent for a heartbeat before bursting into derisive laughter. They thought him melodramatic again. But outside the capital, ships were vanishing. Inside taverns, mercenaries whispered of coded jokes they could not decipher. In distant colonies, miners marched in formation under the cold gaze of Colonel Cross. And through it all, Earth remained outwardly calm, as if an entire planet held its breath. The storm was gathering. On a moonlit night in Montana, Marcus stood alone in his farmhouse, staring at the chessboard once more. He moved a piece, paused, then swept the board clear with one motion. The pieces clattered to the floor like the bones of old wars. He whispered to the empty room, "We've waited long enough." At sea, Riker stood on the deck of a rusting freighter, eyes on the horizon. He tossed an empty bottle into the waves, watching it drift before sinking. "Time to stop telling jokes," he muttered, "and start writing punchlines." In Alaska, Cross loaded his rifle, the click echoing through the cabin. He spoke to no one, but the silence carried like thunder. Far across the stars, in the Senate's gilded chamber, alarms suddenly wailed. Screens flickered with reports. Entire fleets missing, border stations destroyed, human convoys detected in forbidden sectors. Senators scrambled, voices rising in panic. Senator Adlerin slammed his clawed hands against the podium. "This is coincidence. Mammals cannot organize such treachery." But the old sage only shook his head. "You killed their brides. You thought them weak. And now you will learn the price of silence." At that moment, in the depths of space, a vast human fleet emerged from shadows, hulls black against the void. They did not broadcast. They did not speak. They waited, patient as hunters at the mouth of a den. And across secure channels, Marcus Hale's calm voice broke the silence. "Phase 2 begins now." The silence of the void was deceptive. To the Empire's admirals, it was the quiet of dominance. Patrols drifted lazily across sectors, convinced they owned the dark. But in truth, the silence belonged to humans now. It was the pause before the trigger, the breath before the strike. The first disappearance came in the Forem's belt. 6 Imperial frigates slipped into the asteroid fields on routine escort duty. Hours later, their signals cut out. No distress call, no trace. The Senate dismissed it as navigation error. When miners later reported seeing flashes of light, they were ignored. Days later, an entire convoy vanished on the Curious route. Freighters, destroyers, even escorts, all gone. Rumors spread the humans were using weapons invisible to sensors. The Empire's officers laughed at the notion. "The mammals barely maintained their fusion drives," one commander said. "They couldn't vanish a fleet, but vanish it had." In the shadows of that same route, Admiral John Riker leaned back in a battered chair aboard the flagship Resolute. Around him, human officers bent over glowing maps, fingers tracing lines of attack. Riker raised his mug, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. His grin was crooked, sardonic. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "the best part about being underestimated? You only get one chance to show your hand, and when you do," he snapped his fingers. Surprise parties all around. The officers chuckled, not out of humor, but out of anticipation. They had learned to read his jokes for what they were, prologues to destruction. On the frontier, Colonel Ethan Cross marched through a mining colony now transformed into a fortress. The once messy yards of ore and machinery stood in rows, repurposed into barricades. Rifles gleamed in the hands of workers, their bodies hardened by weeks of training. Cross moved among them, his silence magnetic, his scarred face a sermon without words. A boy, no older than 12, lifted a practice rifle and looked up at him. "Sir," the boy asked quietly, "what happens when they come here?" Cross knelt, meeting the boy's eyes. His voice was soft, but steel lay beneath it. "Then we remind them what family means. No grand speeches, no promises, just a vow." The boy nodded, determination burning in his small frame. Meanwhile, in the Senate chamber on Kael'thar, Marcus Hale played his role with perfect civility. He listened to senators bluster about pirates, smiled at their theories of human incompetence, and poured tea as though nothing mattered more. At one point, an avian delegate scoffed, "Your people lack the coordination to resist. We see no fleets. We hear no declarations. You grieve yourselves into impotence." Marcus stirred his tea with meticulous patience. "The absence of noise," he replied evenly, "does not always mean the absence of movement. Sometimes silence means the knife is already at your throat." The chamber rippled with uneasy laughter. They could not tell if he was joking. That uncertainty was deliberate. The trap was almost ready. On the outer rim, a task force of alien cruisers detected faint signals near a dead colony. Hungry for an easy victory, they moved in. What they found were derelict ships, floating lifeless, broadcasting distress beacons. Sensors detected no heat, no power. The alien commander ordered boarding parties. The moment they latched on, the ships ignited. Hidden charges tore through hulls, shredding cruisers from within. Human vessels, cloaked in the debris field, sprang to life. Torpedoes streaked through the void, ripping metal apart. The alien task force died screaming, their signals extinguished in seconds. When fragments reached the Senate, explanations faltered. Pirates did not build traps of such precision. Only tacticians did. Only generals. Marcus Hale, sitting in the chamber that day, accepted condolences with a faint smile. Across the galaxy, Admiral Riker prepared his next move. His fleet had perfected the art of invisibility, not through advanced technology, but through audacity. They painted hulls with asteroid dust, cooled reactors until they were indistinguishable from frozen rock, and waited. Alien fleets passed them by again and again, blind to hunters in plain sight. When Riker finally struck, he did it with flair. A fleet of alien battleships, sleek and arrogant, crossed a sector they believed secure. Riker's ships emerged in perfect formation, blocking their path. He opened a channel, his voice booming across comms. "Gentlemen, ladies, and whatever else you've got, welcome to tonight's entertainment. The game is called Run If You Can. Spoiler alert, you can't." The alien commander sneered, ordering weapons to fire. But their systems jammed. Human tech, patched and cobbled though it seemed, had wormed into their networks. Screens flickered with a single message, for the brides. The human fleet moved as one, tearing the battleships apart with ruthless precision. Not a shot wasted. When the battle ended, wreckage drifted silently, a graveyard under starlight. Riker leaned back, wiping imaginary dust from his jacket. "And that," he quipped, "is what we call a reception. You crashed the wedding. Now we're returning the favor." Colonel Cross's war front was quieter, but no less lethal. Alien raiding parties descended on the colonies he trained, expecting frightened miners. Instead, they met soldiers who fought in disciplined silence, every shot deliberate. Cross led from the front, his rifle steady, his presence unshakable. When the smoke cleared, alien corpses littered the snow. The colonists stood taller, their grief tempered into steel. Cross said nothing. He simply shouldered his rifle and moved on to the next settlement. The Empire's confidence began to crack. Senators argued in panic. Reports piled high of fleets lost, stations gone dark, colonies revolting. Still, official statements downplayed the threat. Isolated incidents, they called them. But fear seeped in. Merchants whispered that humans moved with unnatural unity. Soldiers muttered that battles felt less like skirmishes and more like rehearsed plays. The old sage's warning echoed. Predators breathe before they strike. One evening, Marcus Hale sat in his farmhouse, the photograph of his wife on the table before him. He whispered, "Almost, my love. Almost." Then he rose, put on his uniform, and departed without a backward glance. On Kael'thar, the Senate gathered in emergency session. Panic radiated through the chamber. Senator Adlerin slammed his claws against the podium. "The mammals are nothing. We crushed them once. We will do so again." But even as he spoke, alarms blared. Screens across the chamber lit up with feeds from across the Empire. Fleets annihilated. Supply lines severed. Human signatures detected in forbidden zones. Entire sectors going silent. And then, worst of all, a live transmission broke into every screen. Admiral Riker appeared, grinning, a mug in hand. "Evening, folks," he said casually. "You know, you really shouldn't execute people's brides. Bad manners. Where I'm from, that sort of thing calls for a reception. And believe me," his smile sharpened, "ours is just beginning." The feed cut. The chamber erupted into chaos. In the void beyond Kael'thar, a massive human fleet emerged from darkness. Hulls black as the abyss, silent engines burning cold. They surrounded the capital world, like wolves circling prey. Not a word spoken, not a signal broadcast. Just the oppressive weight of their presence. Marcus Hale's voice carried across secure channels, calm and precise. Position secured. Awaiting confirmation. Colonel Cross's voice followed, quiet as frost. "Colonies are ready. They will not falter." Finally, Riker chuckled, though his tone carried steel. "Well then, gentlemen, let's give them the kind of party they'll never forget." The trap was sprung. The Empire, so proud, so certain, now found itself cornered. Their fleets crippled, their routes severed, their capital encircled. The laughter that had once filled their halls was gone, replaced by a silence they could not bear. And in that silence, humanity's true nature revealed itself, not through speeches or boasts, but through the inevitability of hunters closing in on their prey. The last sound in the Senate chamber was the old sage's whisper, trembling but resolute. "The knife has already been drawn." Beyond the windows, the human fleet advanced. The sky above Kael'thar was crowded with shadows. Human ships hung in orbit, black against black, so silent that even the Empire's sensors strained to confirm their presence. The galaxy had never seen such stillness. Normally, fleets blared orders, lit comms, broadcast bravado. The humans did none of that. They waited like predators at the edge of a clearing, still enough to make prey tremble. Within the Senate chamber, panic spread like fire through dry grass. Delegates shouted over one another, wings beating, claws clicking, mandibles snapping. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others begged for negotiation. The great reptilian Senator Adlerin slammed his talons into the podium, scales quivering with rage. "They are bluffing. Crude ships, scattered colonies, nothing more. The Empire cannot be threatened by widowers with wounded pride." But his words rang hollow against the alarms screaming in the background. Screens flickered with images of fallen fleets, burning stations, entire sectors lost to silence. Every map projected into the chamber showed the same thing. The Empire's borders collapsing inward, like ice cracking beneath a heavy weight. Marcus Hale stood at the edge of the chamber, hands folded neatly behind his back. He did not raise his voice, nor demand attention. When he finally spoke, it was almost conversational. You mistake this for wounded pride. It is not pride. It is promise. Senators froze, turning toward him. His calm was more frightening than Adleran's fury. Marcus continued, his words precise, each one landing like a knife. You executed 3 women, 3 wives. That was not humiliation. That was ignition. You did not shame us, you bound us. And humans, senators, have an inconvenient habit. We remember what is bound to us. Forever. Adleran hissed, empty threats. Marcus only smiled faintly. If they were empty, you would not be surrounded. On the Resolute, Admiral Riker leaned in his chair, boots propped on the console, mug of coffee in his hand. He was patched into the same feed, watching senators squirm. When his turn came, he grinned like a man telling a campfire story. Evening, folks. I won't bore you with strategy. That's Marcus's job. Me? I'm just here for hospitality. He lifted the mug in a toast. Thing is, you threw a wedding party. Forgot to invite us. Now we're returning the favor. Hope you're hungry. His voice hardened, the grin fading. Because we brought fire. Outside, the fleet shifted. Hundreds of engines flared to life, not charging but aligning, a demonstration of precision that made the Empire's admirals blanch. No human fleet had ever moved like that before, fluid, synchronized, as if they shared one mind. In the frozen colonies, Colonel Ethan Cross led his people to transmit a message of their own. Not words, images. The Senate screens crackled to life, showing row after row of colonists standing at attention, rifles across their chests. Children in uniforms too large for them. Women with scarred faces, eyes fierce with determination. Farmers, machinists, miners, all transformed into soldiers. Cross stepped into view, snow swirling around him. His voice was quiet, but the silence it carried cut deeper than shouts. We are not soldiers because we want to be. We are soldiers because you made us so. You thought grief would break us. It forged us instead. And now you will see what it made. The image vanished, but the weight of it lingered. In desperation, the Senate ordered a counterattack. Fleets launched from Kael'thar's surface, thousands of ships rising like silver knives. The Empire still had numbers, still had firepower. Surely mass would overwhelm mammals. The human fleet moved first. Not with bluster, not with waste. Every formation was deliberate, every strike surgical. Missiles found the exact point to split shields. Torpedoes struck only where reactors lay exposed. Battles that should have raged for hours ended in minutes. Imperial commanders screamed in disbelief as entire squadrons vanished before firing a shot. Marcus Hale guided it all with serene precision. His commands were quiet, almost gentle, as though he were directing a symphony rather than a slaughter. Shift the flank. Open corridor 3. Close. His officers obeyed without hesitation, their movements flawless. The Empire's admirals, proud of their drilled discipline, saw for the first time what real unity looked like. Riker's voice filled the comms, cutting through the chaos with mocking levity. Cheer up, boys. Think of it this way. You'll have a great view on your way down. Laughter erupted among human crews, not cruel but sharp-edged, the kind that made their enemies feel small. Colonel Cross, aboard a ground assault transport, landed with his militia on Kael'thar's outer defense stations. His troops moved like shadows, breaching walls, disabling guns, capturing outposts with terrifying efficiency. Aliens expected ragged mobs. What they faced were legions of silent killers, each one fighting as if carrying a vow carved into bone. Reports poured into the Senate chamber faster than delegates could process. Sector 12 lost. Defense ring collapsing. Kael'thar Prime under direct assault. Adleran roared, "This cannot be. Mammals do not think like this. They cannot plan this." The old sage, seated quietly in the shadows of the chamber, finally spoke. His voice cracked with age, but carried undeniable weight. You were warned. Humans do not fight for conquest. They fight for love. And love, senators, is the most inexhaustible weapon of all. The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, explosions lit the heavens. At the height of the battle, the humans broadcast one final transmission across every Imperial channel. Marcus Hale appeared, face calm, uniform immaculate. Behind him, the stars burned with fire. His words were measured, his tone steady. You thought us weak because we loved. You thought us fragile because we bound ourselves to others. But love is not fragility. It is ferocity. You took 3 women from us. And in doing so, you united 3 men who had been taught to win wars. You have made them brothers, and through them, you have made all humanity one. He leaned forward slightly, eyes unwavering. We do not start wars. But when you touch what is ours, we finish them. The broadcast ended. The final push began. Human ships broke the last of Kael'thar's defenses, storming orbit with clinical brutality. Riker's fleet cut through the capital's armadas, laughing over comms even as alien screams filled the void. Cross's forces seized ground, silencing batteries, capturing generals, marching prisoners past the corpses of their arrogance. In the end, the Empire's will broke before its weapons did. Delegates surrendered, soldiers abandoned posts, citizens cowered in silence. The capital world, jewel of the galaxy, bowed to widowers who had turned grief into fire. When the dust settled, Marcus Hale stood in the Senate chamber itself, boots echoing on marble floors once reserved for alien grandeur. Adlerin lay in chains before him, snarling even in defeat. You mammals will destroy everything, Adlerin spat. You cannot stop yourselves. Marcus studied him with quiet pity. No, he said. We destroy only when forced. You forced us. He turned away, leaving the senator to rage against his bonds. Riker entered, tossing aside his empty mug with a grin. Well, gentlemen, looks like the honeymoon's over. Cross followed, silent as ever. He carried no trophies, no pride, only the weight of promises kept. His presence alone was enough. Together, they stood where the Empire had once ruled. 3 widowers bound by grief and vengeance, now architects of something the galaxy would never forget. Word spread quickly. The Empire, once invincible, had been broken not by numbers, not by technology, but by humanity's refusal to let love be stolen without consequence. Across the stars, alien species whispered in fear. The joke was over. The silence had ended. The predators had shown their teeth. In the ruins of the Senate, Marcus addressed the galaxy one final time. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried into every corner of space. Remember this lesson. We are not what you think we are. We are not prey. We are not pawns. We are human. We love. And if you dare touch what we love again, you will remember this day. He paused, his gaze lingering as if speaking to ghosts no one else could see. For the brides. The transmission ended. Above Kael'thar, the human fleet pulled back, not with looting, not with endless conquest, but with terrifying restraint. They had made their point. They had taught their lesson. And now they left silence in their wake, a silence more dreadful than any battle cry. In that silence, the galaxy realized the truth. The execution of 3 brides had not ended in humiliation. It had ended in extinction, for the illusion of imperial supremacy, for the belief that humans were weak, for the arrogance that love could be mocked without consequence. The lesson was carved into the stars themselves, and it would be remembered forever.